how do we decipher whether or not these voices and intuitions are coming from our ego or if they're coming from that which is aligned with God? Today in this video, we are going to get into exactly how to decipher these voices and these intuitions and how to logically ration whether or not these are voices and insights and intuitions that are worth listening to or need to be set aside. Most people do not know the difference between God's voice and their own voice. We naturally confuse our impulses as instruction. They confuse their trauma for prophecy. They confuse their desires with destiny. And because of that, we are led by these voices to chaos, disorder, and turmoil, and most of all, spiritual decay. Today, I'm going to give you an uncompromised framework for discerning whether or not God is actually speaking to you or whether you are just listening to yourself and your flesh. The first truth is that God's voice will always elevate you. God's voice is never going to pull you down, is never going to lower your frequency, your vibration. His voice is never going to deharmonize you or misalign you. His voice always pushes you to greatness, pushes you to the light, and makes you more harmonious and more aligned. And on the other hand, your ego's voice, aka the flesh, inflates you, distracts you, and conflates your identity. God's voice calls you upward, and the ego tries to make you feel larger without actually improving. One voice sharpens your character, while the other voice pampers to your comfort. God's voice always carries a specific signature. It's always calm. It is never frantic. It never begs. It never pressures. And it never manipulates. It is abundantly steady, and it is morally consistent. It tends to push you into responsibility and sacrifice and not escape. It aligns with who you must become, your destiny and your legacy, not who you currently are or what your desires are gravitating towards. God's instruction usually has weight to it, but never anxiety. Pressure breaks you, weight shapes you. Your internal voices are not all the same. You have the ego voice that seeks validation and safety in the short term. We have a wounded voice that speaks from insecurity, pain, trauma, and old memories that have not healed. But conversely, you have the divine voice as well, the voice that feels like stillness moving. It always speaks with clarity even when the message is uncomfortable. It never appeals to your cravings, not at all. It particularly appeals to your consciousness. The voice of God will often disagree with your emotions and your desires. The voice of God will continuously challenge your preferences, and it will stretch your patience. A divine message is rarely flattering. Divine messages refine you. On a biological level, you can only hear God when your physiological mind is not inflamed and when your soul is not cluttered. When your nervous system is chaotic, the inner noise drowns out everything that is higher. The ego thrives in emotional storms. God speaks on the other side of those storms. This is why clarity often comes after prayer, fasting, solitude, or even self-discipline. God does not compete with noise. He waits for silence, whereas chaos and the egoic mind prosper and envelop themselves through this chaos. God never does this. There is one moral test that reveals whether or not these are egoic voices or godly voices. Ask yourself one question. Does this voice make me more disciplined, more honest, more loving, more responsible, and more aligned with truth and source? God's voice always strengthens the backbone. The ego tries to negotiate with weakness. So are these voices leading you to something that could be fruitful in a sacrificial manner that harmonizes with truth, love, generosity, and sacrifice? Or are these voices leading you to your desires, whims, and hedonistic pursuits? And you have to have a key level of discernment to rationalize and define and categorize these voices. And then what you could do on top of this is ask your people in the church, ask your community, ask your family members, and most importantly, read into the Gospels and read into what Jesus actually said. Use these voices that you get, filter them through your church, your community, your logic, your discernment, and the Gospels. And this will help you decide where these voices are coming from. There is a difference between temptation and guidance. Temptation is urgent, impulsive, and lustful. It is obsessed with the immediate reward. Guidance is patient. It carries no fear, and it demands no rush. Temptation seduces your instincts, and guidance matures your spirit. We naturally put so much validation to these voices that tell us to pursue our desires because our flesh is misleading. And we actually tend to shun away these voices that tell us, hey, this isn't the right career for you. This isn't the right woman or man for you. These very painful, uncomfortable ideas we tend to shut away. This is another way in which you're able to decipher where the voices are coming from. Is it high-level consciousness and awareness, or is it your egocentric flesh? If you want to hear God, you must cultivate internal spiritual stillness and alignment with yourself. No more skeletons in the closet. No more are things that you are shameful over. Remove the shackles, and over time your spirit goes through this beautiful sanitization process. You must cultivate this internal stillness as step one. Stillness is not passive. Stillness is spiritual technology that you could leverage. It tunes your inner instrument. Your soul is a tuning fork, and God speaks to you in a way that forces you to resonate upwards, not downwards, not left or right, but upwards. And our ego speaks in static, confusion, misalignment, distraction. Our trauma speaks in echoes. The divine voice creates alignment overall. And there is one final truth that we must accept if we want to garner spiritual discernment. God's voice is not always what you want to hear. In fact, a lot of the time, it's the opposite, because our flesh is inherently embodied and embedded in our psyche. God's voice might not be what you want to hear, but it is always what you need to hear. Almost like a bad psilocybin mushroom trip. People say, oh, that's a horrible trip that I had, and it feels very painful in the moment. But then hindsight kicks in, and you realize that's one of the most revolutionary moments of your life that completely transformed you. It's the same principle and same phenomenon with God's voice. It might be very painful to hear his honesty about your life situations, but that pain is derived from your ego hurting, from your ego yearning for your distraction. Your voice wants comfort. God's voice always wants radical transformation. Your voice wants protection from discomfort. God's voice wants to purify us through the discomfort and through our turmoil and through our sacrifice. This is why the overarching abstraction and final analysis with the stories of Christ, God, the Holy Trinity, the Gospels, and even Christianity itself, there's a sacrificial backbone involved with all these stories extrapolated. This sacrificial principle and function is integral for civilizational abundance. If the voice you are following continuously leads you to chaos, disorder, regret, that is not God's voice. It's very obvious it's not God's voice. Divine guidance and God's voice always produces stability, clarity, and fruitfulness. It makes you wiser and it makes you stronger. It builds your character, especially when the message is difficult. So this is the question we need to ask ourselves. Are we listening to God, or are we listening to the parts of ourselves that fear change? God speaks. The question is whether or not you're humble enough to hear him, whether or not you decrease yourself to have him increase within inside of you. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If anybody has any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I will absolutely get back to them. Without further ado, I hope you guys and gals have a great day, great week, great month, great year, and I will see you in the next one.